When was the last time you thought about cross-dressing? Hello, my name is Zooey Gleaves. I am a DJ, broadcaster, and former cross-dressing drag queen from London. And today we are outside Dalston Superstore to talk about the last 100 years of British drag. So come with me down the rabbit hole. Realistically, in the past 10 years, drag has been pretty inescapable. We've seen it everywhere, in every single medium, on television, on film, fashion, art, music, culture. Drag has seemed to be an inescapable thing that we can't break away from. In the past 5 years, no doubt you've known somebody who might have dipped their toe into drag. And in the past 10 years, we've seen it in places as varied as the Houses of Parliament to the Met Gala. Why has this been the case? Why are we so obsessed with drag right now? I myself have DJ'd in drag around the world at various points, painting myself blue. The world today seems to be drenched in drag. Maybe even one could say a little bit oversaturated, but I suppose the big question is, has the world always been this friendly and receptive towards drag, or indeed this hostile? To me, drag has always been an accepted part of British entertainment and culture, just as much as something like Punch and Judy or the Fairground. Me and my family every single year would go and see a panto, and you would expect to... Sorry, my tuck just popped. And it never felt out of the ordinary or strange to see a drag queen, be it there at the theatre or be it on TV. It was just something that felt part of what it was like to grow up in this country. Even if we throw it as far back as Shakespeare in the Elizabethan times, there is the urban legend of dressed as a girl or drag put in the footnotes of certain plays, obviously in a time when women themselves weren't allowed to perform. Okay, so right now it's the 1920s and we're slowly seeing a burgeoning drag scene happening in the UK. We've got a performer like Vesta Tilley, who's widely considered to be national drag stars. We've got a group of people called the Bright Young Things who aren't so much doing drag, but are more doing a kind of upper class, bohemian, gender performance, self-indulgent sort of situation, which is interesting for the culture. And we're also seeing drag balls happening across London. In the 1940s, morale-boosting drag shows were essential to keep the troops entertained during World War II. And from these drag shows, we saw many of the stars who would later become entertainment staples in the UK, including my personal favourite, Danny LaRue, who got his start in the Navy doing drag shows before becoming one of the biggest entertainment stars in the UK.
There was one particular party of a club member bringing a guest who really didn't want to come because he didn't like my sort of act, you know, that sort of thing. But I think once they see what happens, the fun of it. See, it must be fun, a joke, a big joke. If it's serious, then I understand prejudice.
He didn't so much refer to himself as a drag queen, so much as a comic in a frock, but became so popular in the 60s specifically that he even owned his own club. As we enter the 80s and 90s, an infectious new rebellious energy arrives in British entertainment and comedy. In the wake of Thatcher's Britain and Section 28, a new generation of young people are rebelling against the status quo and the government and using comedy as a way to do that, including incredible queer comedians like Lily Savage and Julian Clary. It feels dangerous and exciting, but also feels stylish and sexy. Lily Savage makes her start working in some of the nastiest gay clubs and comedy clubs in the UK before slowly rising up the ranks to the point where in 1991 she wins the Perrier Award at the Edinburgh Fringe Comedy Festival for her show. This sets her on a course to become one of the most popular entertainers in the UK, hosting iconic family-friendly television shows like Blankety Blank, seen in millions of homes across the country. Lily Savage's look becomes so iconic that key pieces from her drag wardrobe are even exhibited at the V&A for the Enthoven Unboxed exhibition in 2024. And then in 2008, in the wake of the new optimism of Obama's America, a little gay TV show on a little gay network called RuPaul's Drag Race makes its first debut season and becomes an international hit. From this, drag's popularity becomes global, and for the first time, we see an international drag economy take over. Wigs, lashes, lipstick, and an international harem of multi-millionaire drag stars have become the faces of a new pop culture and new media. The question now is, has drag's meteoric rise been a net positive for all the queens involved? We're about to ask London's Jane Norman for her take. We are currently at the Divine, one of East London's drag staple bars on Kingston Road, and we're joined by one of London's fiercest drag divas, an up-and-coming legend in the making with the wonderful Jane Norman. Hi Jane, how are you doing?
Hello, Wembley!
Jane, I think one of the things I wanted to start by asking you was, are there any kind of key tenets of British drag which you've identified? What makes a British drag queen British?
I think it's been diluted quite a lot in recent history, but for me, a British drag queen is rough around the edges, comedic, a little bit smelly, usually quite drunk.
What does drag look like in 2026?
I think there's like two answers to that question. Like, if we're looking at global drag and the idea that everyone understands, most of the straight community understands for what drag to be, I'd say that's quite boring at the moment, a little bit homogenous. But on a more local scene, there are some really exciting, creative, freaky performers. And also there's just quite a lot of terrible drag, and I think terrible drag is just as important as amazing drag.
What did RuPaul's Drag Race and Drag Race UK specifically do to the UK drag scene?
I think a conversation about Drag Race is a conversation about capitalism at large, and I talk about homogenization. I talk about taking something that's supposed to be or is intrinsically transgressive on the outskirts, fringes of society, and making that brand safe and marketable, I think kind of strips away any interest for me personally. But at the same time, I'm a product of a post-Drag Race drag scene. I only got interested in drag from watching US Drag Race.
In the next 5 years or so, how do you see drag evolving? What does the drag scene look like to you?
I think the bubble's is bursting. I think there's like a lot less gigs going around, especially if you've been on the telly. I'm working side by side on the same gigs with girls that have been on the television, and there just isn't enough of an economy in the UK to support this American idea. We as a community experience more and more difficulties as everyone in general is struggling for economical reasons, for social, political issues, sorry to go there, but queer people are infinitely creative, and I'm really kind of excited to see how people will react to that.
If and when we're conscripted for World War III, do you envisage yourself doing drag for the troops on the battlefield?
I've been serving for years now, so I can only think that I'm getting my medal anytime soon. I can probably resign before the war happens.
What is it about doing drag that keeps you coming back to it week after week?
You have to be sick in the head. I think you've got to be a cross-dresser. And I've been cross-dressing for years before I started doing it in public, and long before I started getting paid for it. For me, it's become a really essential gender and artistic expression. And it's also just a really, really easy way to get a free drink.
Because of shows like RuPaul's Drag Race, what many working queens, bar queens, and kind of like week-to-week queens who work in venues just like this have found is that there has become a wider discrepancy in the fees that they are receiving versus the international queens and celebrity queens who are coming to work at these venues too. And what this also means is that after a period of intense saturation with drag, what seems to have happened is that the interest in drag, especially from people who were so feverish for it not even a few years ago, seems to have plateaued. Drag's assimilation into mainstream culture can sometimes make it feel like this once rebellious and cult art form has begun to lose its teeth. But what does this mean for the wider repercussions of drag around the world?